Hey everybody, Dr. B here. We will be starting shortly. We'll be right back. All right, well, here we go. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. If you have any questions, pop it into the Q&A. It's a lot easier so that they don't get buried in the chat. And we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So welcome to Genetics 101, how genetic data provides the big picture when we're addressing root causes of chronic illness and even brain-based illnesses. So I'm super excited to go over this with you today. So when we're talking about the future of medicine, that really is no longer in the future. It's here, it's now, we're doing it. What we're talking about is upstream medicine or root cause medicine. We're talking about upstream nutrition and what is happening basically upstream that eventually starts to manifest as symptoms, conditions, and diseases downstream. For the last 100 years, this has been the trajectory of our experiences when it comes to health. This trajectory of where you start with symptoms and then we go 5, 10, 15 years just dealing with the symptoms. It eventually leads to conditions and we just keep doing the same thing. We don't change what we're doing. We take more medications. Now we're taking maybe 5 medications to cover up the symptoms for the first 3 medications. And these conditions eventually end up leading into disease. And then what do we keep doing? Pretty much the same thing. We just add more medications and we are made as comfortable as possible, knowing that we have these diseases that we're told that are not reversible. And we end up oftentimes managing our terrible symptoms that we have. Once we get to disease, the symptoms usually get worse. And we just manage that until death. And so this has pretty much been the trajectory of our experiences when it comes to health. How many of you can raise your hand? Because that's what you've seen too, right? It really hasn't been about our health at all. In fact, despite all of the so-called research that's really been focused on pharmaceuticals and on surgeries, all the solutions that are outside of our control, we have found are not really working. So this hasn't led to just us as a nation here in the United States becoming the sickest nation on the planet, the sickest industrialized nation on the planet, but globally, we've seen an increase in diseases and death to these diseases rather than a decrease. So what's the solution? It lies in the new model of health and wellness that is no longer the future. It is actually here and it is now. And those of you who are working with us, those of you who are seeing and getting to experience a change in the trajectory of your health because you're working with us, you have already heard what I'm getting ready to say. Your healing lies where? Not outside of you. It lies where? Pop it into the chat if you know the answer to that. Your healing does not lie outside of you. It lies where? Do we have any of the right answers, Anne? It lies inside of us. How many of you are like, oh yeah, I remember that, right? Our healing lies inside of us. We have the keys to our healing, our ability to heal, and our wellness and vibrancy that we've been looking for all along. The thing is that nobody told us that we had the keys, and nobody told us where the lock was, and nobody told us how to unlock with the key. But the reality is that we have 99% control. Once we become aware of how our systemic engines work, and how all the facets of our human experience work, then we can start applying what we've learned, and we can heal, and we can overcome just about any disease. And those of you who have been working with us, you've had the opportunity to experience that. If you have been experiencing that and you're working with us, pop it into the chat and let everyone else know. Everyone who's new, who's visiting us, who may not have had that experience yet, give them a little bit of love and encouragement and let them know how your life has changed. Pop it into the chat and let them know. So one of the things that you don't hear me talk a lot about is how our genetics play a role in our healing. So let's talk a little bit about genetics and epigenetics. And we're going to start with genetics. So genetics it's all about coding. It's much like language, where letters make words, words make paragraphs, paragraphs make chapters, and the chapters make the story, which essentially is giving us information. Well, our DNA does exactly the same thing. Our DNA sequence starts with 4 letters, A, T, C, and G. And these are called codons. These codons, when they're put together, they make words. And when these words come together, they make genes, sentences, to basically write the story of who we are and help drive and send the correct information to our biological systems to tell our cells, tissues, and organs what to do. Now, when it comes to our genes, we are 99% the same. It's the 0.1% that makes us different. Now, this 0.1% difference is what we typically call variations. Some people call them SNPs, mutations, polymorphisms. There's a lot of different names, but this 1% that makes us different is really what makes us unique. It's what makes Anne taller than me. It's what gives Aaron blonde hair versus Anne and I, who have brown hair. Well, mine's getting all silver now, right? And so technically, our DNA are our sequences that come together, and they're made of protein chains, which is why protein is such an important part of our diet. We literally cannot live without it. And these different protein chains form different types of cells, tissues, and organs, depending on the information fed to them from our genes. But what determines if they're working optimally? What determines if our genes are working for us or against us? We're going to talk about that. That's where we get into epigenetics. So epigenetics is really, in the most simple terms, which, it's really not too complex when you think about it this way. It's our ability to control how our genes are working for us or against us. It's the ability for us to control how our genes are expressing. And we hold the keys. Each of us hold the keys to that. So factors such as diet, seasonal changes, financial status, psychological state, our social interactions, our relationships, therapeutic drugs, disease exposure. These are just some of the things in our environment that we, for the most part, have control over. And these can have either beneficial effects or they can have very harmful effects, depending on the specific nature of the influence. And I want you to take a look at this and notice that really these are all things which, for the most part, we have control over. You know how I love to add research for you to see. So here's some published research talking about how the gene environment interactions can lead to disease. So they can lead to healing, health, and optimal vitality, but they can also lead to disease, such as autoimmune disease. And we talk a lot about that in our inflammation masterclass. We also are getting ready to talk about it in our upcoming Beyond the Pill, What They're Not Telling You masterclass. How many of you are registered for that? Raise your hand if you're registered. Team, let me know if we've got some that are registered. And if you want to maybe put the link in for the masterclass, if you haven't registered yet for this masterclass, you do not want to miss out. And so if you can grab the link, if you don't already have it, Aaron or Ann, if you can just maybe message Greg and you can pop that in there so that everyone can register for that. It starts on Sunday, June 4th, and it goes for 5 days live with my team. We've got some amazing case studies to show you, amazing research. And we're really going to be tying in this time how our environment determines our genetic expression and how we have control over our genetic expression and what some of the biggest influences are in our environment that affect our genetic expression. And so don't miss out on that. If you haven't registered yet, definitely get registered for that. We'll be popping the link in to the chat shortly for you. So what are some of the most powerful influences? If we go back here, let's just go back 2 slides. I showed you several of the influences that can make our genes mal-express to where they're not sending the right information to our biological systems. Out of all of these, which one do you think is the most powerful influencer over our genetic expression? Pop it into the chat. Pop it into the chat. What kind of answers do we have, Anne?
So we have food, thoughts and beliefs, diet.
Perfect. Well, whoever said thoughts and beliefs, you get a gold star. So we have a lot of influences. We really do. When it comes to our thoughts, more and more science is coming out every day on the power of our mind to regulate our genetic expression, to heal our cells, tissues, and organs, despite what toxins that we have in our bodies or what kind of toxic junk food that we're eating. Now, I'm not saying that our mind can negate these other things, because at some point it's going to have a cumulative effect that can negatively affect the biology of our body and our human experience. However, the most powerful influence over our genetic expression and the functionality and vitality and the ability to heal our cells, tissues, and organs comes from our mind, our thoughts, our beliefs, the language that we use, how we feel about ourselves and the world around us. And so I popped in this slide so that we can just kind of take a look. The same thoughts lead to the same choices in your foods, in the way you take care of yourself, in the way that you believe that you can or cannot heal, right? It leads to the same habit choices. And so therefore you end up with the same experiences and the same feelings. And ultimately you're in the same place that you were 5, 10, 15 years ago. That's what I call getting stuck on the hamster wheel of suffering. How many of you have been stuck on the hamster wheel of suffering? I was stuck on it for 15, 20 years. And I kept trying to do the same things over and over, thinking I just didn't try hard enough. But I kept ending up in the same place. In fact, I ended up getting worse and worse over time. But when we can learn to master our mind, which takes work, it's like building a muscle. You've got to build new neurological pathways. And just like building a muscle, you've got to do it at least 3 or 4 days a week. We have to do that to build new neurological pathways so that we can start to have new thoughts and new beliefs, which lead to new choices, new habits, new actions, and new behaviors that lead to new experiences, new feelings, and ultimately a brand new state of being. And our clients who work with us, understand this concept. Why? Because we don't just do the genetic testing and the blood work and the gut labs and the toxin labs and the hormone. We also address the other facets of the human condition that are rooted in the mind and in the spirit, in the in learning how to gain coherence of your conscious and unconscious mind, and really learning how to rein in this beautiful thing that we call our brain, that most of us have the inability to rein in. Most of us live our lives stuck in our heads, creating stories and trying to make decisions based off of the very finite and limited knowledge that we have accumulated in our lifetime in this gray matter that we call our mind, our brain, right? And so we spend a lot of time teaching our clients how to master their mind, how to process emotions, how to learn to become the observer of their emotions, how to release trauma, and how to create new neurological connections so that they can have new thoughts, new choices, new actions and behaviors, new experiences and new feelings that ultimately lead to their healing, health, and vitality. Now, to reprogram the mind, we need to reprogram the mind to reprogram the code. So I just talked to you about how we spend a lot of time with our clients. In fact, 12 months teaching them what we collectively have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get certified in, tools, learning how to master our minds, how to process and manage our emotions, how to release these stuck energies in our body, so that we can reprogram the coding in our DNA. So let's take a look at this really quick. Our thoughts and beliefs are energy. In fact, everything about us is pure energy. At the core of who we are, outside of this human suit that we get to live in for a period of time, we are beautiful light beings. Some people might call them souls. Some people might call them spirits. But we are pure energy. In fact, we have a beautiful bioenergetic field, and I think I might have a picture of that somewhere here. And so our thoughts and beliefs, they distort or affect our energy field. When that happens, when you understand that energy is just information, that's exactly what it is, that the information that is going from our thoughts and beliefs is received by our DNA. If that information is not coherent with optimal function of the DNA starts to express differently. Our genes start to express differently. So this is an epigenetic factor, something we have control over, our minds, that if we don't rein in control of our minds, we can literally alter the functionality of the DNA. Then the DNA starts to send out misinformation to the cells, tissues, and organs, leading to a biological response to our biological code that leads to dysfunction, symptoms, disease, and a lot of suffering. So we have control, 99% control over our healing and health, because we have 99% control over our epigenetics. And so we spend a lot of time talking about how our mind is likely our biggest regulator of our genetic expression. But we don't want to forget that many other things can help regulate and help normalize and get our genetic expression to work optimally for us, including our nutrition, including movement of our body, breath. Many of us might go, what does breath have to do with it? Well, when we've been sick for a long time, and or when we've had trauma or stuck emotions, we typically develop a very shallow breathing pattern. We don't breathe normally. And that doesn't just affect the oxygenation of our red blood cells. It literally affects all of the biological function in the body, even our DNA expression, when we don't know how to belly breathe and take in those nice, full, slow breaths, right? The other thing about breath is that when you know how to breathe properly, you can tone your vagus nerve. You can pull yourself out of fight or flight. And we already know that being in a state of fight or flight all the time completely messes with our biology. It's very, very toxic. It's like battery acid to the body. And you can use breath and or a combination of breath and humming or sound to activate your vagus nerve, which pulls you out of fight or flight, brings your body into a state of rest. That's the only state that it can heal in, right? So that's why we have breath there. And we do a lot of breath work with our clients. Movement is very important. Language is very important. And all of these things we have control over. These things influence the energy or information that the DNA is receiving and then outputting to our cells, tissues, and organs. Everybody raise your hand if that makes sense. And I can't see the hands raised, so let me know if we've got hands going up. Does that make sense?
Yes, we do. Hands going up.
Good, good. Now, this is why understanding our genetics can really take us to that next level in guiding precision decisions for the changes that we can make to our environment so that we can experience the healing and the vitality that our bodies are perfectly capable of giving us. And so by understanding why our body or brain chemistry might not be in balance, and adding the genetics to it, we can then understand how to go basically through the back door to get the genetic engines working properly again, so that our genes can then tell our cells, tissues, and organs what to do. So knowing our genetics can help us get very precise when it comes to understanding how we can best restore our individual body and brain chemistry. It can be a real game changer for those who are struggling with chronic neurological issues, brain chemistry imbalances, neurodegenerative diseases, autoimmune diseases, and other types of chronic illnesses. Genetic testing gives you insight into what you need in order for your genes to send the right information, right? And so when I'm talking about input, I'm not just talking about, so let's read the sentence down at the bottom, the right input at the right dose at the right time. Now, you might have heard this phrase before, where you'll hear people say the right nutrient at the right dose at the right time. Well, these typically are from genetic companies who want you to buy their supplements. And supplements are not the end all. That's just another pill. And if you're looking for just another pill, it's not going to work. You will have spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over, 5, 10, 15 years trying all these different supplements. Oh, I'm going to go get a genetic test and it's going to tell me what supplements to take. And then only to find at the end of the day, and you're going to feel totally confused and totally let down and not understand why, when you followed the supplements recommended by your genetic test, why it didn't work. Well, we've got all the other factors that we talked about. Remember all the other factors? Raise your hand. So supplements, yes, they're amazing. And I love them. And I've got so many supplements here at the house. It's ridiculous. I have them in my RV. I have them at the ranch house. I have them here. I have like a little travel bag full of them. I will take up like the whole hotel countertops with my supplements. I love my supplements, but I don't rely on them as the sole factor that's going to heal me. I know that my relationships are important. How I move my body every day is important. What type of calories that I'm putting into my body is important. My thoughts, what I believe about myself and the world around me is important. I know that being able to move energy through me so that it doesn't get stuck is important. I understand that breath is important. So I changed that phrase and I say the right input at the right dose at the right time, because I'm talking about giving your body everything that your body wants and needs so that it can heal, optimize, and you can have the vitality that you want and that you deserve. Now let's go into some genetic testing. The genetic testing, there are lots of different ones out there. We have a couple of different companies that we like to use. And the genetic testing, I like to say, helps you to better understand what your operations manual is. Because I guarantee you, if we were all born with one, just like the cars, when they come off the factory, they all have their operations manual. And if we follow the operations manual, the car will last us a long time. Wouldn't you agree? Well, if we only knew our operations manual from birth, we would all be in a very, very different place right now. We would understand that we need to, from birth, learn how powerful language is. You know, every word that comes out of your mouth sends energy throughout your environment. And with quantum entangling, every word you utter literally reaches around the globe. We literally are all connected through quantum entanglement. Many of us have heard we're all connected, and many of us learned that in a more spiritual sense. Well, now there's science to back up the spirituality. So it's not really woo anymore. Through quantum entanglement, we're all connected. And so even your language has an effect, not just on your DNA and cells, tissues, and organs, but on the whole planet as a whole. And so anyways, I went off on a side tangent. Going back to your genetic testing to understand your operations manual is really, I believe, where it's at for long term. Now, Anne and I used to do genetic testing on everyone. In fact, when Anne used to be my patient, Anne, if you want to wave your hand, because Anne is here, many of you know her, she came to me years ago when I was still doing the doctor-patient model. I had an office, so I had a brick and mortar. And when she came to me, I ordered a bunch of labs and the genetic testing. In fact, I required it on everyone. And then when Anne came on board to start working with me, she remembers the time when I was still ordering genetic testing on everyone. In our mission to make the holistic approaches available for everyone, to make them as affordable as possible, we have taken the data from thousands of genetic tests over the years, and we've been able to see some common denominators in people, with a majority of the population having certain genetic mutations or SNPs or variations. And so we take those into account when we teach you your protocols for healing, so that if you can't afford to do the genetic testing, we've got those bases covered already. And so, but if you can't afford to do the genetic testing, then there are some really good ones out there. We use a couple of different ones, and I just want to show you a little bit about some of the fun things that you can see, that you can learn about yourself when you do the genetic testing. So one of the things that you can learn when you do genetic testing is about your detoxification genes and your methylation genes. And I like to put those kind of together, because even if all of your detoxification genes are working, if your methylation genes are not working optimally for you, you're going to have some detoxification issues. So I like to put those together. And not only will the genetic testing show you if you have variations in those genes, but we get these beautiful reports put together for you that show you what lifestyle changes and also what supplements can really help you to make up for some of the deficiencies or dysfunction in your cells, tissues, and organs when your genes are malexpressing. So I'll give you a really good example. Years and years ago, when I was going through my healing journey, I had already made some big progress, but I was still struggling with a lot of memory loss, brain fog, and really I would have my emotions that would take me into a place of freeze. So I would go into a state of freeze with my emotions because they would get really intense. And one day I went to go see a doctor in Austin, Texas, who I heard about, who was doing MTHFR testing. He only tested me for 2 genes. And for the price that I paid, which was about $800, almost $900 for just 2 genes, we can look at 60 different genes or more these days for around that price, sometimes a little bit less. But anyways, I went and had those 2 genes tested, and lo and behold, I came back with double mutations in both of those genes. And he said, wow, this explains a lot about why you're still struggling. And he proceeded to put me on a very high dose of methylated folate and methylated B12. And no joke, within 24 hours, I felt like I had made a 180-degree turn in my mental health. Like my brain came back online, and I hadn't felt like that in years. And I felt like a miracle had just happened for me. And by the way, we put all of our clients on the same high dose methylfolate and methyl B12 that I was put on. In fact, it's very, very hard to even find that potent of a dose anywhere out there. Anyways, I just wanted to share that with you so that you can see how getting the keys to your own operations manual can literally help you to understand what you need to do for you that's super individualized, that can make the difference in your healing. And sometimes it can happen like almost in the snap of a finger. Now, the genetic testing can also help you understand other things about your environment. Remember, I mentioned it's not all about, you see a mutation and you take a supplement. It can also help you to understand if you have any propensities to certain foods. Now, we can also do gut zoomers and wheat zoomers and food sensitivity tests so that we can see if your body is actually reacting. But guess what else we can do? We can also look at your genetics. And many times, for example, if a person has celiac or they have Crohn's, they've got some really big issue with gluten, you can look at their genetic test, not always, but often you can see certain variations in certain genes that are directly related to how your body processes and tolerates gluten. It's amazing. So, Anne, I'm going to ask you, because I don't remember, it's been so long. You have a history of celiac that you've shared with many people. Mm-hmm. When we looked at your genes, did you have any variants in the genes that are directly related to how your body would tolerate gluten?
Yes. So I had already done, much like you, I paid a lot of money for 1 or 2 markers. I had already paid for the celiac markers and the gluten sensitivity markers. And yes, I had a majority of those, but you did this same genetics panel that you just showed a few minutes ago on the screen with me. And I also had a lot of the methylation markers as well, and some of the glutathione markers. And so I had a lot of SNPs around detox, which the gluten issue also obviously played a role in because it was causing tons of inflammation in the body. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And so oftentimes when we start putting the pieces together, this is where we get a really big picture. And this is where a lot of doctors go wrong. They will either look at one gene and then try to make a determination about everything about you, or they'll only look at your genetics and try to make a determination about what you need and don't need. But they forget to look at the whole picture. So like with Anne and with our other clients, we'll put all the labs out on the table and their history, right? So we're going to look at, past traumas or heightened emotional experiences, any physical or emotional traumas. We're going to look at their blood work, their hormones. We're going to look at their toxin labs. We're going to look at all of these other labs, and then we're going to layer the genetics right on top of that. And that's where the eyes start to get really big when we're going over everything together with our clients to really, really help them see how their variation in their gene is really being turned on or off by the foods they're eating or the stress that they don't know how to manage, right? Or their lack of exercise, or the toxins that they're being exposed to in their environment. And once they see that, it really helps them understand and get motivated as to why they need to make the changes. Now, and I just talked about that. So the genetic testing together with the history and the other testing can really help your practitioners to help you more easily and effectively create a personalized plan of action for your lifestyle, your protocols, your foods, your supplements, and other changes that you need to make. Remember, the healing is within you so that you can see the healing and the optimization and the results that you're looking for. Now, genetic testing can also be done to help you understand what medications can be okay for you versus which ones can harm you. Now, how many of you knew about this pharmacogenetic type of testing? Raise your hand if you knew about this. Now, I personally believe that this should be gold standard in the Western medicine or traditional medicine model. I believe that before any doctor is legally allowed to prescribe anything for you, that everyone should have one of these pharmacogenetic tests on file. And the reason is because prescription medications have consistently for over 20 years now been the number 3 killer of people around the world. How many of you knew that? How many of you knew that? Yeah, that's a statistic. You can look it up. It's crazy. And it's just stayed up there. It's just stayed up there. And so imagine how many deaths and disabilities, because some of these people don't die. It's even worse. From my perspective, dying would be easier than the disabilities that you're left with after being maimed and poisoned by pharmaceuticals that you never should have been on in the first place. And it doesn't cost that much. It would actually save the insurance companies a lot of money if they would require that everyone get pharmaceutical genetic testing at a minimum, and then test some of their other genes, like their methylation genes and their immune system genes and their gut genes and all of these other things secondary. But everybody should have this before getting on any kind of medication. We have had clients that we've worked with who needed to go and get surgery for maybe a hip replacement or something, who had been working with us for a year and recovered their health after being sick for 15 or 20 years. They had come off of, 10, 15, 20 different medications. And then, 2 or 3 years into their wellness and optimization work with us, they would call up and go, you know what, I've got to do surgery. That pharmacogenetic test, can we order that? And we're like, absolutely, let's do that. And, I want to say that I'm sure that has really helped them with their outcomes, because they can take that to their surgeon and their anesthesiologist can look at that and know which anesthesia that they need to stay away from. Did you know that anesthesia is the highest risk medical profession of all the medical professions? Raise your hand if you knew that. So I first learned about that from my father, who was a surgeon. He was an eye surgeon. And back when I was younger and we were talking about maybe what kind of specialty that I wanted to go into, I had talked about anesthesiology. And he told me no. And I said, why? And he said, they have the highest rate of suicide, the highest rate of drug use. So they use the drugs that they use on you. They get addicted to them. And they have the highest malpractice of all medical specialties because they kill more people than any other specialty. Let that sink in for a minute. So as you can see here on the slide, you can do the pharmacogenetics where it can test for the medicines that doctors would prescribe for various cardiac issues like beta blockers or anticoagulants or other medications that doctors might prescribe for pain. You can see here, like opioids, for example. Anticonvulsants can be prescribed for pain. Antidepressants are often prescribed for pain. But in some people, it's going to make them worse. It could even kill them. How many of you have ever been on a pain medication and you had a really bad side effect? Yeah. If you had done this pharmacogenetic testing, you could have avoided that. And it's not just about you taking it to your doctor, because your doctor may not even look at that. He may glance at it and act like he's looking at it and still prescribe you, an opioid that your genetic test clearly said could kill you. And so this is where I say your healing is within you. We need to take radical responsibility for our own healing and health. We do. Because they're not doing that, right? Here is another section. Now, there are many different medications that can be tested for, right? Or many different genes that can be tested for. And that would have taken up 10 slides. So I just picked a few here for you. But here are the psychotropic ones. Psychotropic meaning medications for mental health. And you might recognize some of those. How many of you recognize some of those? Raise your hand if you're on some of those yourself. These are not the brand names. So, but you can see here that you can get tested for this too. So that if you need to get on medication, which we recommend that if you're really struggling, get on the medication, but then come back and see us so that we can figure out what the real root cause is, so that eventually you can get off of that medication. Because long-term, these medications are not fixing anything. Right? But you can see here that if you do need to get on a medication, that you can find the ones that you're going to resonate, that your DNA and your body will resonate with versus the ones that you should stay away from. And there are some more psychotropic ones and some of the surgical ones. And then the genetic testing, and then this is the gene dose genetic response report. So here you can see on the report which medication, like your doctor can see which one to be cautious with and which ones that you shouldn't be on. But he can also get more information because most of the doctors don't know this stuff. They're not taught this stuff in school, and it's not a gold standard, so they don't understand it. It comes with another section of the report that will really help the doctor to understand why they should not put you on a particular medication. And so by adding the genetic testing to your array of labs, a seasoned practitioner, one who's seasoned in understanding the complexities of how your environment and your genes are interacting, they can help you more easily and effectively to create your personalized plan of action for your lifestyle, your supplements, any trauma and emotional healing that you need to do, and so that you can see the healing that you're looking for. Now, I've got a couple of case studies, and I'm going to run through these relatively quickly, just for time's sake. But this is a case study of a 21-year-old male who came to us really struggling with suicide ideation, anxiety, depression, OCD, brain fog. And he had started struggling with severe depression before he was 10 years old. And by the time he was 10, they had put him on really, really, really high dose of, no, it wasn't Zoloft. I don't remember which one it was. Zoloft is what he ended up on. I don't remember right now, but they put him on a really, really high dose starting from the time he was 10. By the time he came to see us, he was 20 years old. And his mom had found us from our mental health masterclass. And so anyways, we started digging in and diving to see what are the root causes. Well, we found generational trauma that was stuck in his body. I teach about that in our trauma masterclass. I teach the science behind how generational trauma can change your genetic expression. And then that can be passed down for, so far we know, up to 7 generations. So this young man, he was aware of the generational trauma, but he was not made aware of how it was exactly affecting him until he came to see us. So he had that going on. And because of the generational trauma, he grew up with a very skewed view of himself and the world around him. And he really lacked deep self-love. In addition to those, what I will call toxins and barriers to healing, we also discovered that he had some environmental factors, like these toxins that were found at very high levels. You can see the before and after testing that we did after we put him through our very well researched and proven detoxification protocols. We also found this NAHP found in his body. All of these, by the way, are not only known to cause cancer, they're known to cause, they're all neurotoxins. So they're known to cause neurological dysfunction and mental health issues. So he had many different barriers to healing or toxins that were stacked on top of each other that were just making his symptoms worse. This is another chemical that we found. And it's known to cause, liver and kidney disease, central nervous system toxicity, cancers, peripheral neurotoxicity. So that means toxicity of the nerves in your periphery, in your arms and legs. So we found all of that. So we got a good history. We found out that he had all these emotions that he just didn't know how to process, because we're not taught how to do that stuff. We're not born with the manual, with the operations manual. He had generational trauma stuck in his body, along with emotions stuck in his body, along with thoughts that really were not serving him. And then he had these toxins, these chemical toxins in his body. And then we went ahead and we did his genetic testing. And when we saw his genetic testing, it really helped us understand that his body was extra susceptible to the stress, to the emotional stress, and it was extra susceptible to the toxins that his body could not naturally get out. And so those stressors took his genes that were already, they were altered, they had variations in the genes, and it started making them mal-express. So now his biological engines are not working either. And so in particular with him, he had some methylation issues, and they were actually mal-expressing. So just because you have a mutation or a variation or a SNP in your gene, it doesn't mean it's always going to be mal-expressing forever. If you can remove the toxins, remove the traumas, change the thoughts, get the right exercise, get the right sleep, those genes can start to express normally again. How do we know if they're expressing normally or not? We can look at the ancillary labs. We can look at other things, and we can see, and we can tie together that, certain markers on his blood that are typically associated with a mal-expression of the methylation genes. Then when we look at the methylation genes and see that there are variations in those genes, and then we look back at the blood again and see those changes in those markers, we can pretty much put 2 and 2 together and go, Yep, those genes are malexpressing right now from the toxins, the traumas, and the thoughts, right? In addition, he also had some changes or some variations rather in some of his genes that are directly related to sending information to the gut to make certain brain chemicals like GABA and dopamine and serotonin, right? And so we were able to look and put all the pieces together, and we were able to really, really help this young man. Donna, she was another one. I'm going to go ahead and skip past for just to save time here. And I have the slide in here. I just want to go over this with you, how important it is. We spent a lot of time talking about chemicals, chemical toxicities. We spent a lot of time talking about our thoughts, our emotions, our belief systems, but mycotoxins, so toxic mold, and I call it toxic cocktail of fake food stuff, that can really cause malexpression of the genes. In fact, it can actually cause a mutation in your gene, which then you're going to pass on for future generations. So it's really, really important that we do the testing so that you can understand what's going on inside of your body, what you've been exposed to, and how you can change that so that you can heal. We already talked about that. Let me just skip forward here. This is a genetic indicator of potential gluten issues. So this is the one, the HLA DQA2 is one of the genes that you can look at. And this is the one that Ann and I were referring to earlier, that many people who have celiac, surprise, surprise, they've got this. Now imagine if we were doing this genetic testing on babies. We could prevent them from having ADD and ADHD. We could prevent them from having all of these defiant disorders and these mood swings and all this stuff if we could understand their blueprint from the time of birth. We could do a much better job than what we're doing now. I've got a lot of case studies, but again, I'm going to skip through that. So final slide. Knowing your genes really does give you precision answers and solutions. Now, I want to ask, how many of you enjoyed this? Raise your hand, pop it into the chat. Let me know if you learned something new. Let me know if you, if you are interested in getting the genetic testing. We have it available. I don't have any specials for you today. I always try to have that because whenever we talk about this stuff, everybody wants to know. But I will do this. If you're interested in getting some genetic testing, I don't have everyone's first and last names here on the chats, but if you're interested in getting genetic testing, send an email with the subject line, genetic testing, to admin@modernholistichealth.com. And if you can just put in and I want you to do that tonight so that we can see if we have enough people interested. I'll do something special and we'll email you back personally to let you know. The genetic testing is usually like for this one particular panel, the test, well, it depends on what testing that you're wanting. So if you're wanting the pharmacogenetics panel, put that in the content, like just put genetics in the subject line. And then inside of there, put, if you're interested in the pharmacogenetics or if you want all of it, just let us know. And if we get enough people, we'll put something together and we'll give you a discount because whenever we do that, we usually do pretty nice ones for you. So don't send it here, Melissa. You want to send it to admin@modernholistichealth.com. You want to send an email, and in the subject line, you want to put genetic testing in there. Yes, so I'm super excited that you guys are excited. And Carolyn, You can discuss your genetics with Anne or with myself. And we have someone who is probably even knows more than me. You think I know a lot. I've had several conversations with a gentleman named Dr. Tim, and he, unofficial, very likely will be joining our team. He is an amazing genetic expert. And so, so it could be with any of us. And we can go over that with you. Now, we like to look at it in conjunction with other labs. Looking at it by itself really doesn't tell you as much information as you would think. We need to look at it in conjunction. So thank you so much for joining us. We love you so much. We had such a great audience. Do we have a couple of questions, Anne, that we need to answer before we go ahead and close out for the evening?
Yeah, we have two. So Susie asked, would our genetic testing look different if it was taken in different years, or would it pretty much look the same?
It will look the same. So your genes don't change. The expression of your genes changes. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that the genes, the actual physical structure of the gene stays the same. And the gene, just because the gene is a little different, doesn't mean that you're going to be sick. It's the different stressors that we put on our body in the form of traumas, toxins, and thoughts that can get so bad that it will make that gene suddenly switch its functionality, where otherwise it wouldn't switch its functionality. It'll switch its functionality and it'll malfunction, causing a cascade of misinformation to your cells, tissues, and organs that ultimately leads to conditions and diseases.
One other question, Diana is asking, is it a good idea to continue the supplements that are recommended on the genetic report indefinitely? Do they need to be changed up periodically?
Yes. So you don't need to take everything that's on there. And that's where working with an expert can really help you. You might be overtaking stuff and spending a lot of money and wasting a lot of money that you don't need to spend. You may be taking things that you don't need. And that's why working with an expert can really, really help you to determine, what do you really need right now in your body? And that's where I said that, this type of testing can be so powerful, but unfortunately, it gets used, would say misused, where you have companies that will do the genetic testing just so that they can sell you supplements. And now you're buying all these supplements, totally believing that, well, I've got all these gene things, I have to take these. And that's not true. You might need to take some of them for a specific period of time, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have to always take them.
Mm-hmm. Missy's asking, is it still worth doing if you've already done the gut zoomer, wheat zoomer, oats, and the tox bundle?
Oh, yeah. I think it's totally worth doing. And, we tell a lot of our clients that, look, you can do it now while you're working on your actual healing. If you're still sick and you're working on your healing, you can do it now. And we'll know what to do with it. We're not going to go in super deep detail with you until you heal. Then we're going to recircle back around and we'll use it again. We will just modify your protocols based off of your genetics. The reason that we won't go into an hour on your genetics is because you'll get the deer in the headlights look, especially if you're sick. You've got brain fog, you've got anxiety, you can't remember stuff anyway, you're not feeling well. And then on top of us teaching you everything else we're teaching you, now we spend an hour going deep with your genetics. We just keep it simple for you in the beginning, and we'll look at your genetics. And it really does help us to get more precise with your protocols for you. And it helps us get a deeper understanding of maybe what other things that we might want to do outside of our more general protocol that we're doing. But we can then also use it later once you've gone into your healing, so that we can help you understand how to slow the aging process down, reverse the aging process, and really take your body and your mind to the next level in terms of its performance.
Mm-hmm. Elena has a great question. Can genes mutate in a positive direction if you take good care of yourself and then be passed down to your kids that way?
That's another topic that I actually talk about. And I haven't talked about that one in a long time. I've got an entire presentation on that. So absolutely. A lot of people think that, oh my God, I've got a gene mutation. I've got a mutation. Something's wrong with me. Cancel, clear, delete, all of that. This is a process of evolution. Your body is so intelligent, it knows exactly what it's doing. And when your body, when you're forming in the womb and your genes are doing their things, if you have a variation in your gene, the majority of the time, these variations, I'm not talking about a genetic defect that you're born with where your like limb is deformed or like you have some kind of an issue. That's from a toxicity that your mother or your father had that caused that type of a gene mutation that's serious, like where you're born without legs or, two heads or whatever, or a tail, like all that kind of weird stuff happens. But these variants that we're talking about, the ones that, can cause like an inability to break down dopamine or an inability to make enough GABA or an inability to make enough serotonin or where you break it down too fast or these different things. It's a process of evolution. And I believe, and many people who are experts like me, we see it from the same lenses. These are giving you superpowers and they're preparing you for your next process of evolution. But your operations manual is different from the other person. So I like to I always use the car analogies. I don't know why I do that, but most of us might be in general, we might have the maintenance schedule of a Toyota, but you might have the maintenance schedule of a Ferrari. You might be a little different maintenance, right? Maybe you can't eat gluten because it's going to lead to Parkinson's, but hey, I'd rather know that I can't eat gluten than die of Parkinson's. Who wants to go through that? And it's traumatizing, not just for you, it's traumatizing for your whole family. Not to mention it's way more costly than you could ever imagine, before you finally die. So, these can give us superpowers if we know the keys to our operations manual, if we understand what we need to do with our mind and body so that we can make those genes work for us rather than against us. So for example, there is a gene called MAO. There's a few MAO genes, but in general, these genes, they can affect your serotonin production. Now, some people might go, oh my gosh, I've got this mutation and that's why I've got this serotonin issue and something's wrong with me. Again, cancel, clear, delete all of that. Did you know that the government looks for people with, how should I say this? The perfect soldier for the front lines are people with those MAO mutations. They have superpowers. They can tolerate pain better than anybody else. So if they got hit by a bullet, they're going to just keep on going. They're going to keep going. It's not going to phase them, right? Unless they bleed out, they're just going to keep on going. They're also able to not freak out if they're in the line of fire. They stay laser focused on their task. That makes them super soldiers. And the government knows this. So it's not an accident. Now, if you don't have the right maintenance schedule and you've got insults coming that are not allowing your body to function optimally, this variation in your MAO gene can end up leading to aggression, which on the front lines, that's a good thing, right? But it can lead to aggression and it can lead to really big time depression. So that's just one example of how these variations in our genes give us superpowers. We just have to understand the keys to our operations manual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's all the questions.
Yay, that's all the questions.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're so glad that you were here. Be sure to join us for our next Tribe Talk, which, by the way, team, if you could put the mhhinnercircle.com, that's where you register. If you can pop it into the chat, you can register for our next one. And I will let you know that we are going to be moving the date for the next one because it falls on the same day as the week of our live masterclass, Beyond the Pill. It's falling on the same day. And so we're going to be moving it out, but you can go ahead and get registered anyway. Whenever we move the Zoom date, it should notify you on that. And we're probably going to be changing over a few topics. Topics that we've been getting feedback from everyone on, topics that they're interested in. So we will likely be changing some of the topics, and I think they're going to be riveting and they're so relevant for today. And I think you're going to absolutely love it. So thank you again for joining us. We love you so much. I wish you the best of health and the best of vitality, and know that you're not broken. There are answers and there are solutions. And here at Modern Holistic Health, our purpose and our mission is to help guide you and teach you these answers and solutions so that you can get your health and vitality back. We'll talk to you soon.